In that courtroom, silence spoke louder than any words could. He sat confidently, convinced he had claimed everything: the house, the assets, the future. But what he failed to realize was the deeper cost, the hidden layers of consequence that would unfold over time. As the judge delivered the verdict, his smile was the final testament to his arrogance. Little did he know, the true price of his victory would not be in the possessions he took, but in the unraveling of trust and the weight of his own actions. For years she had quietly prepared, not with loud defiance, but with patient strategy. While he believed he had taken everything, he overlooked the true power that remained within her. Her resilience, her wisdom, and the secrets she kept safe. As the story unfolds, it becomes evident that true power lies not in what is taken, but in what remains and how it is wielded in silence. This is the journey of a woman who transformed her loss into an unstoppable, quiet force. And as the final pieces fall into place, the true cost of that victory becomes undeniable. But I am getting ahead of myself. To understand why that courtroom moment mattered, you need to know who I was long before the paperwork, the lawyers, and the silence. My name is Alexis Dunst. I am 34 years old, and for most of my adult life, I was the woman behind someone else's success. I did not grow up reckless or dreamy. I grew up practical, focused, the kind of person who pays attention while everyone else is talking. At 17, I finished high school early. Not because I was brilliant, but because I wanted independence more than comfort. I took a job at a small law firm as a file clerk. Minimum pay, endless paperwork, and lessons no classroom ever taught. I learned how documents tell the truth when people do not. I learned how silence can protect or destroy, depending on who uses it. By 18, I was a legal assistant. By 20, I understood numbers, contracts, timelines, and consequences better than most people twice my age. That was my itch. I just did not know it yet. When I married Vincent, my role slowly shifted. On paper, I became a wife. In reality, I became infrastructure. I handled logistics. I organized finances. I kept records clean. I made sure deadlines were met. I noticed patterns other people missed. None of that showed up on social media. None of that earned applause. It just made everything run. People often assume credibility comes from titles or confidence. Mine came from consistency, from years of watching how decisions stack up, from understanding that systems rarely collapse overnight. They crack quietly, one overlooked detail at a time. I was not emotional in moments where others expected chaos. I was observant. While people saw me as supportive, flexible, agreeable, I was absorbing information. While conversations moved fast, I stayed still. While others spoke, I listened. That habit shaped everything that followed. So when the story later painted me as the woman who lost everything, it missed an important detail. I had spent years learning how everything actually works. Money, trust, control, timing. That knowledge does not disappear just because a marriage ends. It waits, and it becomes relevant when the right moment arrives. That moment did not begin in the courtroom. It began much earlier, in quiet rooms, late nights, and choices that seemed small at the time. The kind of choices people stop noticing right before they matter most. Vincent entered my life the way confident men usually do, already talking as if the future had cleared space just for him. We met at a small professional mixer downtown. Nothing glamorous. Cheap wine. Awkward name tags. I was there helping my firm with intake notes. He was there pitching himself to anyone who would listen. Real estate. Big plans. Bigger confidence. He spoke in certainties, not possibilities, and people leaned in. I noticed something else. He liked being believed. Our first conversation lasted 10 minutes. He told me where he was headed. I told him what I did for work. He laughed, said that was useful, and asked for my number like the outcome was already settled. Felt bold at the time. Almost refreshing. That confidence became the hook. Dates followed quickly. Late dinners. Long walks. Talk about ambition, freedom, and building something that mattered. He spoke about success like it was inevitable. I listened like it was a project worth investing in. Trust grew fast. Faster than it should have. He promised partnership. Not just romance but teamwork. He talked about building a life where effort was shared and loyalty meant something. I believed him because his words sounded organized, intentional, and forward-looking. That mattered to me. I had always planned carefully, loved carefully. So when someone arrived with a clear direction, I leaned in. I matched his pace. I supported his goals. I imagined a future that felt solid, not flashy. Marriage came early. Not rushed but decisive. At least that is how it felt then. We talked about growth. About sacrifices that would pay off later. About weathering storms together. Those conversations set expectations I carried quietly. I invested emotionally the same way I invested practically. Fully. Thoughtfully. Without shortcuts. I adjusted my plans to fit ours. I shifted priorities. I made room for his vision alongside mine. He noticed that. He called it devotion. Called it trust. The early years were full of reassurance. Promises made casually, reinforced by action just enough to feel safe. He said things like, "I could not do this without you. And we are building this together." I took those words seriously. I built around them. Dreams felt shared then. Goals felt aligned. The future felt mutual. That is the dangerous part of early promises. They do not arrive with warning labels. They sound sincere. They feel warm. They invite commitment before they ask for proof. I believed we were moving forward side by side. What I did not see yet was how differently we defined ownership. How he measured success by control while I measured it by stability. How his confidence needed constant reinforcement, while mine was quieter, rooted in preparation. Those differences stayed subtle at first. They always do. Back then, I thought trust was built by believing someone when they spoke about the future. I did not realize it is built by watching how they treat the present. That understanding came later. Much later. And by the time it did, the emotional investment was already deep enough to make walking away feel unthinkable. At least that is how it looked from the outside. The life we shared did not happen by accident. It was built deliberately, piece by piece, mostly by hands no one ever applauded. When Vincent's career started gaining traction, my world quietly rearranged itself around his. Not because he demanded it outright, but because the expectation settled in without needing to be spoken. He had momentum. I had structure. It felt logical at the time. Someone had to keep things steady while he chased growth. That someone was me. I became the background system that made everything look effortless. I managed schedules, organized finances, handled emails, tracked deadlines, and solved problems before they became visible. When clients called, I smoothed things over. When paperwork piled up, I stayed late. When stress hit, I absorbed it. None of that came with a paycheck. None of it came with recognition. My title stayed simple. Wife. Behind that title lived multiple roles. Bookkeeper. Planner. Gatekeeper. Emotional buffer. The person who remembered birthdays, appointments, and obligations. The one who kept life running while ambition took center stage. Sacrifices followed naturally. Career opportunities one postponed. Personal goals I reshaped. Time I gave away in small, reasonable increments that added up faster than I realized. I told myself it was temporary, that teamwork sometimes looks uneven before it balances out. That balance never arrived. Emotionally, I became the place where everything landed. His frustration, his anxiety, his wins, his losses. I listened when he needed validation. I encouraged him when doubt crept in. I downplayed my own exhaustion to keep the peace. People saw a supportive marriage. They did not see the invisible labor holding it together. I learned how to stay calm when things went sideways. How to problem solve quietly. How to carry pressure without showing strain. Those skills kept our life polished. They also taught him something unspoken. That I would always adjust. Practical support blended into emotional responsibility so smoothly it felt normal. I reminded him of commitments. Covered gaps. Cleaned up messes that were not mine to begin with. When mistakes happened, I fixed them before anyone noticed. From the outside, it looked like harmony. Inside, it felt like maintenance. Friends praised his drive. Family admired his success. I stood beside him, smiling, playing the role expected of me. The woman behind the scenes. The one who held things down. That phrase sounds flattering until you realize what it costs. I did not resent him then. I believed in the long game. I believed effort would eventually be acknowledged. I believed partnership meant carrying weight when needed. What I did not realize was how one-sided the definition had become. Support turned into expectation. Sacrifice turned into baseline. Emotional availability turned into entitlement. The more reliable I became, the less visible my contribution felt. That shift did not arrive loudly. It slipped in quietly, disguised as routine. By the time I noticed how much of myself I had wrapped around his life, it already felt permanent. Like this was just how things worked. Like wanting something back would be selfish. That belief kept me steady for years. It also taught him that my strength was guaranteed. And guaranteed things, as it turns out, are the easiest to undervalue. The shift did not arrive with an argument. It arrived with tone. Decisions started happening without discussion. Small ones at first. Dinner plans. Weekend schedules. Then bigger moves. Financial choices. Business priorities. Conversations that used to include me now happened around me. He began informing instead of asking. First I brushed it off. Growth brings pressure. Pressure changes people. That was the story I told myself. It felt reasonable. Responsible even. I adjusted like I always did. That adjustment slowly became expectation. Comments followed. Casual. Almost harmless on the surface. Remarks about how I dressed. Jokes about how sensitive I was becoming. Observations about my lack of ambition. Delivered with a half smile like constructive feedback. I noticed the pattern before I acknowledged the impact. Respect started slipping in quiet ways. He interrupted more. He dismissed concerns faster. When I disagreed, he framed it as stress or emotion, never substance. Conversations tilted. His voice carried more weight. Mine carried justification. That imbalance changed the air in the room. Power rarely announces itself. It accumulates. I found myself choosing words carefully, timing responses, reading moods before speaking. That kind of awareness feels like empathy until it starts costing peace. I was no longer a partner in motion. I was managing reactions. Emotional erosion does not feel dramatic. Feels dull. Like wearing something heavy for too long and forgetting how lightness feels. Confidence thins. Boundaries blur. The need to keep things smooth overrides the need to be heard. He noticed the quiet. He liked it. Control crept in wrapped as concern. Suggestions about what made sense. Opinions framed as facts. He positioned himself as the rational one. The leader. The adult in the room. I became support staff in my own life. Friends noticed before I admitted it. Side-eye comments. Awkward pauses. Subtle questions asked gently then dropped. I defended him automatically. Defended us. That reflex came easy. Admitting the truth felt harder than carrying it. There were moments I almost spoke up. Pauses where the old version of me surfaced, ready to push back. Each time I swallowed it. Chose peace over friction. Stability over discomfort. That choice reshaped the dynamic. He grew more comfortable setting terms. I grew more practiced at adapting. The gap widened without a single raised voice. That is how power shifts last. They do not need noise. Emotionally, something fragile started wearing away. Trust shifted into caution. Openness into filtering. I shared less. Not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. It felt safer to stay neutral. He interpreted that as compliance. By the time I realized partnership had turned into hierarchy, the structure felt established. Unspoken rules. Clear roles. Predictable outcomes. He expected agreement. I delivered calm. From the outside, nothing looked wrong. Inside, I was shrinking in ways that did not show up on schedules or balance sheets. The erosion lived in tone, timing, and absence. In the way conversations ended before they started. In the way my instincts learned to stand down. That version of me survived for a while. Long enough for him to believe it was permanent. Long enough for him to forget that silence is not submission. It is observation. And observation always gathers information before it changes anything. The moment arrived on an ordinary evening, which somehow made it worse. He came home earlier than usual. No rush. No tension in his shoulders. He moved through the house like someone who had already made peace with a decision. I was in the kitchen, halfway through dinner, following a routine I could do on autopilot. He asked me to sit down. That request alone felt off. His voice stayed calm. Almost professional. No anger. No hesitation. He did not circle the point or soften the landing. He said he wanted a divorce, then paused just long enough to let the words settle. I waited for the rest. He delivered it cleanly. He wanted the house, the business, the accounts, everything that mattered on paper. He said it the way someone lists items during a checkout. Efficient, confident, final. You can keep the rest, he added, as if generosity had entered the room. That was when I understood something had shifted beyond repair. His confidence was unsettling. Not loud, not cruel, just certain. He spoke like a man who had already run the numbers, already planned the exit, already decided how the story would be told. There was no doubt in his posture, no question in his tone. He believed the outcome belonged to him. I did not interrupt. I did not ask why. I did not demand explanations. My body stayed still while my thoughts moved fast. Years of pattern recognition kicked in. This was not impulsive. This was prepared. Internally, a strange calm took over. Shock usually comes with noise. This came with clarity. I noticed details instead. How relaxed his hands looked. How he avoided my eyes when discussing logistics. How practiced his phrasing felt. That confidence answered questions he had not spoken. He talked about fairness while claiming everything. He framed control as resolution. He described the future like it was already approved. Each sentence confirmed he expected compliance, not conversation. I let him talk. Inside, emotions lined up in quiet order. Disbelief arrived first. Then disappointment. Not heartbreak. Not yet. That came later. This moment belonged to realization. The marriage I thought we were protecting had already been sorted into assets and outcomes. The partnership I believed in had been reduced to leverage. The man across from me was not asking for a divorce. He was announcing terms. I felt the weight of it settle in my chest, heavy but manageable. I had carried heavier things before. What surprised me was the absence of panic, the absence of desperation. I was not scrambling for words. I was listening. He mistook that silence for weakness. I could see it in the way he leaned back once he finished. Relief crossed his face. Satisfaction. He believed the hard part was over. He had no idea the hard part had not started. That night I went to bed without arguing, without crying, without negotiating. My thoughts stayed sharp, focused. This was not the end of something fragile. This was the beginning of consequences. And he had just shown me exactly how confident people become when they think they have already won. The aftermath did not unfold quietly. It arrived in layers. His mother was the first to make it official. She showed up unannounced one afternoon, dressed like she was attending a luncheon rather than stepping into the wreckage of a marriage. Her voice carried sympathy without warmth, the kind that sounds polite but lands sharp. She told me she was disappointed things had reached this point, then followed it with advice I did not ask for. She suggested I should have been more flexible, more supportive, more understanding of a man's pressure. Each word felt rehearsed. She spoke as if I were a temporary inconvenience, not the woman who had kept notice of every moving part for years. Her glances drifted around the house like she was already taking inventory. What stayed? What went? What I deserved to keep? That visit set the tone. Soon after, the girlfriend appeared. Younger, polished, confident in a way that only comes from not knowing the full story. She showed up smiling, casual, acting like she belonged there. Like the space I occupied had already been cleared for her arrival. He did not bother hiding it. He brought her into rooms that still held my things. Sat beside her where I once sat. Introduced her like an upgrade, not a replacement. Her presence felt deliberate. A quiet reminder that I was being phased out. That was humiliation without raised voices. Financial limits followed next. Cards stopped working. Accounts shifted. Access narrowed. He framed it as keeping things clean while tightening control. Money became permission-based. Requests felt like negotiations. Independence shrank overnight. I adjusted my spending instinctively, not out of fear but awareness. Watching how quickly resources can be used as leverage teaches lessons no one forgets. Friends noticed changes before they understood them. Invitations slowed. Conversations turned cautious. People asked questions indirectly, choosing sides without admitting it. Stories circulated. Assumptions filled gaps I refused to explain. Social judgment is rarely loud. It whispers. Some believed I had failed. Others assumed I was unstable. Few thought I was dramatic. He presented himself as composed, reasonable, cooperative. That narrative traveled well. I stayed quiet. Isolation crept in gradually, not through absence alone but through atmosphere. The way rooms felt colder. The way conversations felt shorter. The way I stopped being seen as central to the story. That invisibility hurt more than the insults. Being underestimated has a particular sting. It strips credibility before facts are considered. People stop asking what you know. They assume you are reacting, not thinking. That assumption worked in my favor. While they watched me lose access, status, and space, they stopped paying attention to my focus. They mistook restraint for defeat, silence for surrender. He leaned into that belief. His confidence grew as mine appeared to fade. He spoke freely around me, let details slip, trusted the version of me he thought he had reduced. That was the cost of humiliation he never calculated. Emotionally, the days felt heavy. Nights felt longer. I felt the loneliness, no question. There were moments when the weight pressed hard. Moments when disappearing sounded easier than enduring. But beneath that isolation, something else formed. Clarity. The social noise fell away. Performances stopped mattering. I no longer had to manage perception. I only had to manage truth. Humiliation stripped distractions. Isolation sharpened focus. They thought they were watching me fall apart. What they were actually watching was me stepping out of view. And when someone disappears quietly, people rarely notice what they are preparing. The truth did not appear during the divorce. It surfaced years before, on a night that felt unremarkable until it was not. Vincent was working late. Again. The house was quiet in that way that makes small sounds feel louder. I sat at the dining table with a laptop, sorting through financial records the way I always did. Routine work. Familiar numbers. Patterns I knew by heart. Then something broke the rhythm. One transfer did not belong there. It was small enough to ignore, which is why it stood out. I traced it back, then followed another. Different account. Same direction. A quiet outflow that did not match income timing or expense categories. Curiosity sharpened. I pulled older statements. Cross-checked dates. Lined things up side by side. The more I looked, the clearer it became. This was not a mistake. It was a system. Money was moving out steadily. Loans layered on top of loans. Obligations stacked quietly beneath assets that looked impressive on the surface. The house carried more weight than it should have. The business relied on borrowed momentum. Credit filled gaps success had not yet earned. The picture formed slowly, but once it did, it was impossible to unsee. We were not thriving. We were leveraged. The numbers told a story Vincent never mentioned. Multiple liabilities tied to single assets. Lines of credit maxed close to their limits. Payments structured to delay pressure, not remove it. Appearances carefully maintained. I sat there longer than planned, letting the truth settle without panic. Shock arrived, but clarity followed fast. This was not carelessness. It was avoidance. Risk disguised as confidence. I kept digging. Transactions led to places I did not recognize. Spending that never showed up at home. Choices made without discussion. Commitments hidden behind optimism. It explained everything. The late nights. The urgency. The control. The defensiveness whenever finances came up. The insistence on managing things alone. He was not building an empire. He was juggling exposure. My first instinct was to confront him. Demand answers. Force transparency. That instinct passed quickly. I knew his patterns too well by then. Confrontation would lead to denial, deflection, and just enough charm to blur facts. I chose restraint. Instead of reacting, I documented. Screenshots. Statements. Timelines. Copies stored where they could not disappear. I mapped obligations against assets and saw the imbalance clearly. The house looked impressive until debt pulled the curtain back. The business sounded strong until obligations spoke louder than revenue. I did not change my behavior. I kept playing my role. Kept things running. Kept listening. Kept observing. The knowledge stayed quiet, heavy and precise. That silence was intentional. People assume discovery leads to action. Sometimes it leads to preparation. I understood the risk of tipping him off. I understood how fast someone becomes careful once they realize they are being seen. So I stayed invisible. No accusations. No hints. No emotional tells. I learned to live with information that changed everything while acting like nothing had changed at all. That takes discipline. It also takes patience. Years passed. The debt grew. The image stayed intact. He believed control meant safety. He believed confidence could outrun consequences. I let him believe that. Because once the truth is known, timing becomes everything. Revealing it too early gives people time to escape. Revealing it too late removes choice. I waited in the space between. By the time the divorce arrived, the secret was no longer just knowledge. It was leverage earned through silence. And the most important part was this. He never suspected I knew. Not then. Not later. Not until it was far too late to change the outcome. Knowledge changes its weight once it is organized. After that night, nothing felt urgent on the surface, yet everything became intentional underneath. I did not rush. I did not panic. I shifted into preparation mode, the kind that does not announce itself. Documentation came first. Every statement I touched was copied. Every loan record was saved. Every transfer, every balance, every obligation found a place in a quiet archive that lived outside the house. Digital backups. Physical copies. Dates labeled clearly. Patterns mapped carefully. Nothing dramatic. Just accuracy. Truth has a way of protecting itself when it is recorded properly. I treated it like a long-term project. One that required patience more than action. I reviewed numbers monthly. Tracked changes. Watched liabilities grow while assets stayed polished for public view. The picture sharpened over time. The next step was protection. I separated what needed to be untouchable. Money I had earned before the marriage. Funds that were legally mine. Resources that never crossed into shared accounts. I made sure nothing blurred lines. No shortcuts. No assumptions. I consulted quietly. Asked questions without revealing context. Learned exactly where boundaries existed and how to keep them intact. Protection is not about hiding. It is about clarity. Once safeguards were in place, I stopped adjusting anything. That was the hardest part. The instinct to intervene stayed loud. To fix things. To correct course. To reduce damage. I ignored it. Interference would have exposed awareness. Awareness would have triggered defense. Instead, I waited. Waiting allowed patterns to continue. Waiting allowed decisions to stack. Waiting allowed confidence to turn careless. People behave differently when they think they are unobserved. He grew comfortable. Relaxed. Less cautious. The same habits repeated because nothing challenged them. That consistency mattered more than any confrontation. From the outside, life moved forward normally. Work. Events. Conversations. I stayed composed. Supportive. Neutral. No sudden changes. No emotional tells. That balance kept suspicion away. Waiting is not passive. It is strategic stillness. Every delay increased clarity. Every month added evidence. Every choice he made without restraint strengthened the eventual outcome. I measured time differently then. Not in days but in leverage. Not in conversations but in accumulation. Preparation does not look impressive. It looks boring. That is why it works. People expect reaction. They prepare for resistance. They do not prepare for silence backed by structure. I understood something important during that period. Silence is not empty. It is full of information. It creates space for others to reveal themselves fully. So I stayed quiet. I let him believe control was absolute. I let him believe confidence was protection. I let him believe the story he was telling himself. Because the longer someone believes they are winning, the more they expose how they did it. And when the moment finally arrived, I did not need to scramble. I did not need to improvise. I did not need to explain. Everything was already in place. Preparation had done its job. All that remained was timing. Mediation began exactly how I knew it would. Neutral room. Neutral tones. Neutral language that pretends balance exists when power already has a shape. He arrived relaxed, almost cheerful, like someone checking off a task before moving on. His confidence filled the space before he even spoke. I arrived quieter. Not defeated. Measured. That difference mattered. I kept my posture small, shoulders slightly folded, voice steady but soft. I asked questions instead of making statements. I let pauses stretch just long enough to suggest uncertainty. The version of me in that room matched the story he had already decided to believe. That I was tired. That I wanted it over. That I did not have the energy to fight. The mediator looked at me with professional concern. He looked at me with relief. He talked first. Laid out demands smoothly. House. Business. Accounts. Control framed as closure. He sounded reasonable because no one challenged him. I did not interrupt. When it was my turn, I spoke carefully. I said I wanted fairness, not conflict. I said I did not want to drag things out. I said stability mattered more than assets. Every sentence landed exactly where it needed to. Then I asked for very little. A modest cash amount. Enough to start fresh. Personal belongings. Clean separation. Nothing dramatic. Nothing aggressive. No claim on what he considered valuable. The room shifted. The mediator blinked. He leaned forward, asked if I was sure. He repeated the number slowly, like he expected me to correct it. I did not. I nodded once. He looked stunned. My husband looked victorious. That reaction told me everything. He accepted immediately. No negotiation. No hesitation. He agreed so fast it almost felt careless. The relief on his face was unmistakable. This was easier than he expected. Cheaper. Faster. That confidence loosened him. He started talking freely. Made comments about moving on. About efficiency. About how reasonable this was turning out to be. He framed generosity as strength. He enjoyed the moment. I stayed quiet. Acting weak does not mean acting clueless. It means controlling expectation. I gave them exactly the version they needed to see. Cooperative. Unthreatening. Ready to move forward. Inside, I tracked details. The refusal to audit. The dismissal of verification. The eagerness to finalize. Those choices mattered. He waved off additional review like it was unnecessary. Said he knew his own numbers. Said delays were pointless. Said paperwork was just formalities. That was the tell. People who rush signatures believe speed equals safety. They forget that documents remember everything confidence ignores. I let him rush. By the end of mediation, the tone felt settled. Almost friendly. He shook hands. Thanked the mediator. Gave me a look that mixed pity and pride. He believed he had outplayed me. Walking out, I felt the weight of performance settle off my shoulders. Playing that role took discipline. It required swallowing instinct. Choosing restraint when every nerve wants fairness. But the reward was clarity. They stopped watching me. They stopped filtering information. They stopped protecting themselves. That is the danger of underestimating someone. You stop preparing for them. As we moved toward finalization, his confidence grew louder. Mine disappeared from his radar completely. That imbalance created space. Space where consequences gather. Space where silence does the heavy lifting. All I had to do was keep playing the part a little longer. Because when people believe you are done, they stop guarding the ending. And that is where the story turns. Morning light filtered through tall courtroom windows, sharp and unforgiving. Wood benches creaked as people settled. Paper shuffled. Shoes echoed once, then stopped. The room felt still in the way places do when outcomes pretend to be neutral. He arrived early. Tailored suit. Relaxed posture. A look that said this was already handled. He greeted his lawyer with easy confidence and scanned the room like someone checking a watch. Everything about him suggested certainty. I entered minutes later. Simple dress. No jewelry. Hair pulled back. Nothing to distract from the impression he expected to see. Calm. Small. Finished. The version of me he had rehearsed in his head. The judge took her seat. Formalities followed. Names read. Case referenced. No drama. Just procedure. That was the point. Documents were passed forward. Thick stacks. Clean tabs. Precise formatting. Pages he had barely glanced at during mediation now sat neatly aligned, waiting to be acknowledged. His lawyer began summarizing the agreement. Assets listed clearly. Property. Business interests. Accounts. Everything he wanted awarded exactly as requested. The tone remained neutral. The effect was not, His shoulders loosened. Then came the addendum. A separate section. Standard in structure. Easy to overlook. Dense enough to discourage curiosity. It outlined obligations attached to every asset claimed. Mortgages tied to properties. Credit lines linked to operations. Guarantees embedded in contracts. Numbers printed plainly without commentary. His lawyer paused. Not long. Just enough. I watched the shift register. Brows tightened. Pages flipped back remindedly. A finger traced lines more carefully than before. The air changed. The judge asked a routine confirmation. Did both parties understand the full scope of the agreement? Was everything signed voluntarily? Were there questions? He nodded quickly. Too quickly. His lawyer leaned closer, voice low. Papers rustled. The conversation stayed private, but the reaction did not. Color drained from his face. Hands steadied against the table. Confidence fractured. He finally looked down. Not at me. At the numbers. Debt did not announce itself dramatically. It waits quietly on the page, patient and precise. Loans layered beneath ownership. Liabilities mapped directly to the assets he demanded. Nothing hidden. Nothing exaggerated. Just consequences aligned with choices. He straightened, then faltered. Objection came late. Words tangled. He claimed misunderstanding. Suggested confusion. Reached for fairness like it was a switch someone else controlled. The judge listened, eyes steady, tone firm. Documents were clear. Signatures were his. Waivers acknowledged, advice declined. Verification offered and refused. The record spoke without emotion. The ruling followed procedure. Assets transferred. Liabilities transferred. Final. The gavel did not slam. It tapped. Quiet. Definitive. The realization landed slowly. He had not taken wealth. He had taken weight. Obligations accumulated over years, now carried alone. The future he believed he owned arrived with interest. I remained still. There was no satisfaction in his expression shifting. No pleasure in watching certainty unravel. Only confirmation. Preparation had held. Silence had done its work. As proceedings concluded, his lawyer gathered papers with care. He stayed seated, staring forward, recalculating in real time. Plans rewritten under pressure. Confidence replaced by arithmetic. I stood. Collected my copy. Thanked the clerk. Walked toward the exit without looking back. Not out of spite. Out of completion. Behind me, voices lowered. Questions surfaced too late. Explanations chased signatures that no longer moved. Outside, the air felt different. Lighter. Not because something had been taken, but because something had been released. The twist had never been about punishment. It was about alignment. What he demanded matched what he received. Exactly. Collapse does not always sound like breaking glass. Sometimes it sounds like silence settling too hard. The realization did not hit him all at once. It arrived in fragments. A number reread. A line checked again. A calculation that refused to change no matter how many times he ran it back. Confidence drained slowly, like air slipping out of something he assumed was solid. Shock followed denial. He tried to speak, then stopped. Tried again, quieter this time. His lawyer leaned in, explaining what had already been explained. Assets and obligations move together. Ownership carries responsibility. Signatures do not negotiate after the fact. That was the moment his posture changed. Shoulders dropped. Spine stiffened. The relaxed ease he walked in with disappeared, replaced by a tension that did not know where to go. He looked around the room like someone expecting an exit that had quietly closed. Power shifted without noise. A few minutes earlier he controlled the outcome. Now he was recalculating survival. The future he imagined had arrived carrying invoices, deadlines, and pressure that no one else was obligated to absorb. He finally looked at me. Not with anger. Not with accusation. With confusion. That look said everything words could not. He was searching for a mistake, a trick, a misunderstanding that might return him to certainty. He found none. Silence answered him. I did not explain. I did not justify. I did not react. There is a particular kind of authority that comes from not needing to speak when someone else finally understands. The room felt different because the balance had changed. Attention shifted. Energy moved. The story corrected itself. He stood abruptly, then sat again, like his body could not decide what to do with the information. The confidence that once filled every space around him had nowhere left to land. That absence was visible. This was not revenge. It was consequence. People often confuse the two. Revenge requires emotion. Consequence requires alignment. One is loud. The other is inevitable. He had chosen speed over scrutiny, control over clarity, image over structure. Now the structure spoke. The shock stayed with him as we left the courtroom. Conversations blurred around him. He moved slower, thought heavier. Every step recalculated. Every plan rewritten under pressure. I walked past without stopping. The power shift did not come from victory. Came from completion. I had nothing left to prove, nothing left to explain, nothing left to manage. Silence held the final word. And in that silence, everything he thought he owned finally revealed its cost. Not to me. To him. Fallout never waits for permission. It spreads. The girlfriend vanished first. Not dramatically. No scene. No speech. Just absence. Her calls slowed then stopped. Photos disappeared. The version of him she signed up for no longer existed. And loyalty has limits when comfort evaporates. She exited the way she entered, quietly and quickly, leaving behind a few unanswered questions and a cleared closet. That silence said enough. Family reactions followed a different rhythm. First there was confusion. Carefully worded messages. Awkward check-ins disguised as concern. Then distance. People recalibrate fast when narratives collapse. The certainty they once borrowed from his confidence no longer held. Support thinned. His mother called once. The tone had changed. Less judgment. More caution. She asked questions she never asked before. I kept my responses short. Polite. Neutral. The past did not need revisiting. That chapter had already closed. Others stayed quiet entirely. Silence, it turns out, is contagious. Social consequences arrived next. Friends chose sides without announcements. Invitations shifted. Conversations changed direction when he entered a room. The same confidence that once attracted attention now drew scrutiny. People listen differently when success stumbles. Reputation adjusts faster than most expect. He tried to maintain appearances, kept routines, showed up where he was expected. The effort showed. Confidence without backing carries a certain strain. People sense it. They always do. Meanwhile, my world simplified. No explanations. No defenses. No managing impressions. The noise faded naturally once I stopped feeding it. That relief surprised me. I had not realized how much energy went into maintaining balance until it disappeared. Some friends returned quietly. No apologies. Just presence. That was enough. Others stayed away. That clarity helped too. Social circles refine themselves after disruption. Emotionally, the space felt unfamiliar at first. Quieter. Slower. Then steadier. Without constant adjustment, my thoughts settled. Mornings felt lighter. Evenings felt honest. Not happy in a polished way but real. That mattered. He struggled publicly. Not in headlines but in small visible ways. Delayed responses. Missed commitments. The kind of unraveling that does not announce itself but becomes obvious over time. I did not watch closely. The story was no longer mine to manage. Aftermath is rarely about punishment. It is about redistribution. Energy shifts. Attention moves. Life rearranges itself around truth once performance ends. I focus forward. No victory laps. No commentary. No explanations offered. Closure does not require witnesses. The consequences played out on their own schedule. And for the first time in a long while, my peace did not depend on anyone else understanding why. Closure did not arrive with relief. It arrived with quiet. Not the heavy kind that presses on your chest, but the kind that lets your thoughts stretch out without interruption. The kind that feels unfamiliar at first, then steady. For the first time in years, nothing needed managing. Nothing needed smoothing over. Nothing required anticipation. That space changed everything. I moved slower not because I was tired but because I could. Decisions belonged to me again. Mornings started without tension. Evenings ended without rehearsing conversations that never happened. The constant low-level vigilance faded. Emotionally, the shift felt subtle, then undeniable. I stopped replaying moments, stopped questioning my instincts. The self-doubt that had lived quietly in the background lost its footing once I no longer needed permission to exist fully. Confidence returned, not loudly but honestly. Growth did not look dramatic. It looked like choosing myself without guilt. It looked like setting boundaries without apology. It looked like recognizing strength in restraint, not endurance. I rebuilt in small, deliberate ways. New routines. New priorities. Space that reflected who I was, not who I had been required to be. Independence did not feel lonely. It felt aligned. People often mistake independence for distance. For me, it became clarity. I knew what I wanted. I knew what I would no longer tolerate. That awareness brought peace no compromise ever had. There were emotional moments, of course. Grief does not disappear just because understanding arrives. I allowed it space. Let it pass through without rushing it out. Healing works best when it is not forced. What surprised me most was how light everything felt once I stopped carrying weight that was never mine. I reconnected with parts of myself that had gone quiet. Interests I postponed. Opinions I softened. Dreams I placed on hold. They returned without pressure, like they had been waiting patiently for the noise to settle. Independence does not announce itself with celebration. Settles in. Life became simpler. Not smaller. Clearer. Every choice felt intentional. Every relationship felt mutual. Every effort felt recognized even when no one was watching. I no longer needed validation from outcomes. The work had already been done internally. Closure is often misunderstood. It is not about answers. It is about acceptance. Accepting what happened. Accepting what changed. Accepting what will never return. That acceptance freed me. Not because I won. Not because he lost. But because I no longer needed the story to resolve itself for me to move forward. I had already stepped into the life waiting on the other side of silence. The lesson I carry forward is simple, but it took years to learn. Self-worth does not come from being chosen. It comes from choosing yourself when it would be easier not to. I once believed loyalty meant endurance. That staying quiet proved strength. That supporting someone else's vision would eventually circle back to me. Those beliefs kept me functional, not fulfilled. They kept the system running while my own voice faded into the background. What changed everything was not confrontation. It was clarity. I learned that silence can be powerful when it is intentional. That preparation beats reaction. That patience, when paired with truth, creates outcomes no argument ever could. People often rush to be heard. Very few take the time to be right. The calm ending matters because chaos never builds anything lasting. It only burns energy. Real balance comes from alignment, from knowing what you bring to the table and refusing to undervalue it for comfort or approval. If there is one takeaway from this story, it is this. Never confuse compliance with peace. Never confuse control with confidence. Never assume silence means weakness. Sometimes silence is the strongest move on the board. I did not walk away lighter because someone else fell. I walked away lighter because I stopped carrying what was never mine. That shift changes how you show up everywhere else. In work. In relationships. In choices you no longer make out of habit. That is the real win. If you are watching this and something feels familiar, trust that instinct. If you have ever been underestimated, overlooked, or quietly pushed aside, remember this. The version of you that observes, prepares, and waits is not behind. It is ahead. Before you go, I want to hear from you. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Would you have spoken up earlier, or waited until the timing was right? And tell me this too. Where are you watching from right now? The USA, the UK, Canada, or somewhere else entirely? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share your story if you have one. You never know who might need to read it today. Quiet strength always finds its moment.